Continuing Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain. Tom went aboard one of the big transient boats that night with his heavy satchel of miscellaneous plunder, and slept the sleep of the unjust, which is serener and sounder than the other kind, as we know by the hanging Eve story of a million rascals. But when he got up in the morning, luck was against him again. A brother thief had robbed him while he slept, and gone ashore in some intermediate landing. Chapter 16. Sold down the river. If you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, he will not bite you. This is the principal difference between a dog and a man. Pudd'nhead Wilson's Calendar. We know all about the habits of the ant. We know all about the habits of the bee, but we know nothing about the habits of the oyster. It seems almost certain that we have been choosing the wrong time for studying the oyster. Pudd'nhead Wilson's Calendar. When Roxana arrived, she found her son in such despair and misery that her heart was touched, and her motherhood rose up strong in her. He was ruined past hope now. His destruction would be immediate and sure, and he would be an outcast and friendless. That was reason enough for a mother to love a child, so she loved him, and told him so, and made him wince secretly, for she was a Negro, and that he was one himself was far from reconciling him to that despised race. Well, nobody should be despised because of their ancestry, but the idea that if you're a 32nd something or a 16th of something or a quarter something, that it cancels out your other ancestry is just ridiculous. Roxana poured out endearments upon him, to which he responded uncomfortably, but as well as he could, and she tried to comfort him, but that was not possible. These intimacies quickly became horrible to him, and within the hour he began to try to get up courage enough to tell her so, and require that they be discontinued or very considerably modified. But he was afraid of her, and besides, there came a lull now, for she had begun to think. She was trying to invent a saving plan. Finally she started up and said she had found a way out. Tom was almost suffocated by the joy of the sudden good news. Roxana said, "Here is the plan, and she'll win sure. As a Negro, and nobody in Gwaine to doubt it that hears me talk. I's wuth $600. Take and sell me, and pay off these gamblers." Tom was dazed. He was not sure he had heard aright. He was dumb for a moment, but then he said, "Do you mean that you would be sold into slavery to save me? Ain't you my chill? And does you know anything that a mother won't do for her child? They ain't nothing a white mother won't do for her child. Who made 'em so? The Lord done it. And who made the Negroes? The Lord made 'em. In the inside, mothers is all the same. The good Lord, he made 'em so. I's gwine to be sold into slavery. In a year, you's gwine to buy me. Your mama's free again. I'll show you how. That's the plan." Tom's hopes began to rise, and his spirits along with him. He said, "It's lovely of you, Mammy. It's just say it again, and keep saying it. It's all the pay a body can want in this world, and it's more than enough. Laws bless you, honey. When I's slaving around and this busses me, if I know you's a-saying that way off yonder somewheres, it'll heal up all the sore places, and I can stand 'em. I do say it again, Mammy, and I'll keep on saying it too. But how's am I going to sell you? You're free, you know. Much difference that make. White folks ain't particular. The law can sell me now if they tell me to leave the state in 6 months, and I don't go. You drop a paper, bill of sale, and put it way off yonder, down in the middle of, Kentuck summers, and sign some names to it, and say you'll sell me cheap 'cause you is hot of, and You'll find a going to have no trouble. You ain't going. You take me into the country a piece and sell me on a farm, then people ain't going to ask no questions if I's a bargain. Tom forged a bill of sale and sold his mother to an Arkansas cotton planter for a trifle over $600. He did not want to commit this treachery, but luck threw the man in his way, and this saved him the necessity of going up country to hunt a purchaser, with the added risk of having to answer a lot of questions, whereas this planter was so pleased with Roxa that he asked next to none at all. Besides, the planter insisted that Roxy wouldn't know where she was at first, and that by the time she found out, she would already have become contented. So Tom argued with himself that it was an immense advantage for Roxy to have a master who was as pleased with her as this planter manifestly was. In almost no time his flowing reasons carried him to the point of even half believing he was doing Roxy a splendid, surreptitious service in selling her down the river, and that he kept diligently saying to himself all the time, "It's only for a year. In a year I'll buy her free again. She'll keep that in mind, and it'll reconcile her." Yes, the little deception could do no harm, and everything would come out right and pleasant in the end anyway. By agreement, the conversation, in Roxy's presence, was all about the man's up-country farm, and how pleasant a place it was, and how happy the Slays were there. So poor Roxy was entirely deceived, and easily, for she was not dreaming that her own son could be guilty of treason to a mother who, in voluntarily going into slavery of any kind, mild or severe, or of any duration, brief or long, was making a sacrifice for him compared with which death would have been a poor and commonplace one. She lavished tears and loving caresses upon him privately, and then went away with her owner, went away broken-hearted, and yet proud of what she was doing, and glad that it was in her power to do it. Tom squared his accounts, and resolved to keep her to the very letter of his reform, and never to put that will in jeopardy again. He had $300 left. According to his mother's plan, he was to put that safely away and add her half of his pension to it monthly. In 1 year, this fund would buy her free again. For a whole week, he was not able to sleep well. So much the villainy which he had played upon this trusting mother preyed upon his rag of a conscience. But after that, he began to get comfortable again, and was presently able to sleep like any other miscreant. The boat bore Roxy away from St. Louis at 4 in the afternoon, and she stood on the lower guard, abaft the paddle box, and watched Tom through a blur of tears until he melted into a throng of people and disappeared, and then she looked no more, but sat there on a coil of cable, crying, till far into the night, when she went to her foul steerage bunk at last. Between the clashing engines, it was not to sleep, but only to wait for the morning, and waiting grieve. It had been imagined that she would not know, and would not think she was traveling upstream. Why, she had been steamboating for years. At dawn she got up and went listlessly and sat down on the cable coil again. She passed many a snag whose break could have told her a thing to break her heart, for it showed a current moving in the same direction that the boat was going, but her thoughts were elsewhere, and she did not notice. But at last the roar of a bigger and nearer break than usual brought her out of her torpor, and she looked up, and her practised eye fell upon that telltale rush of water. For one moment her petrified gaze fixed itself there. Then her head dropped upon her breast, and she said, "Oh, de good Lord, have mercy on poor sinful me. I sold down the river." Chapter 17. The judge utters dire prophecy. Even popularity can be overdone. In Rome, along at first, you were full of regrets that Michelangelo died. But by and by, you only regret that you didn't see him do it. Pudd'nhead Wilson's Calendar. July 4. Statistics show that we lose more fools on this day than on all the other days of the year put together. This proves, by the number left in stock, that 1 4th of July per year is now inadequate. The country has grown so, Pudd'nhead Wilson's Calendar. And No, people are getting hurt and all that because of foolish behavior. Those dying kind of doesn't wipe out the problem with it. There'd be more problem even if you do have the more people die out of place. It's better just to focus. If there's going to be depopulation of any sort, if there's murderers and rapists and child molesters, and perhaps people with enough other offenses to pile up, then then the culling would be a lot better for society than just increase the danger and the foolish people will naturally be part off, but then society as a whole is but that this hopefully the state, I don't know what this plan is, takes care of things. The summer weeks dragged by, and then the political campaign opened in pretty warm fashion and waxed hotter and hotter daily. The twins threw themselves into it with their whole heart, for their self-love was engaged. Their popularity, so general at first, had suffered afterwards, mainly because they had been too popular, and so a natural reaction had followed. Besides, it had been diligently whispered around that it was curious, indeed very curious, that the wonderful knife of theirs did not turn up, if it was so valuable, or if it had ever existed. And with the whisperings went chucklings and nudgings and winks, and things have an effect. The twins considered that success in the election would reinstate them, and that the defeat would work them into irreparable damage. Therefore they worked hard, but not harder than Judge Driscoll and Tom worked against them in the closing days of the canvass. Tom's conduct had remained so letter perfect during the whole 2 months now that his uncle not only trusted him with the money with which to persuade voters, but trusted him to go and get it himself out of the safe in the private sitting room. The closing speech of the campaign was made by Judge Driscoll, and he made it against both of the foreigners. It was disastrously effective. He poured out rivers of ridicule upon them, and forced the big mass meeting to laugh and applaud. He scoffed at them as adventurers, mountebanks, sideshow riffraff, dime museum freaks. He assailed their showy titles with measureless derision. He said they were back-alley barbers disguised as nobilities, peanut peddlers masquerading as gentlemen, organ grinders bereft of their brother monkery. And at last he stopped and stood still. He waited until the place had become absolutely silent and expectant. Then he delivered his deadliest shot, delivered it with ice-cold seriousness and deliberation, with a significant emphasis upon the closing words. He said that he believed that the reward offered for the lost knife was humbug and buncombe, and that its owner would know where to find it whenever he should have occasion to assassinate somebody. Then he stepped from the stand, leaving a startled and impressive hush behind him, instead of the customary explosion of cheers and party cries. The strange remark flew far and wide over the town and made an extraordinary sensation. Everybody was asking, what could he mean by that? And everybody went on asking that question, but in vain, for the judge only said he knew what he was talking about and stopped there. Tom said he hadn't any idea what his uncle meant, and Wilson, whenever he was asked what he thought it meant, parried the question by asking the questioner what he thought it meant. Wilson was elected. The twins were defeated, crushed in fact, and left forlorn and substantially friendless. Tom went back to St. Louis happy. Dawson's Landing had a week of repose now, and it needed it, but it was in an expectant state, for the air was full of rumors of a New Deal. Judge Driscoll's election labors had prostrated him, but it was said that as soon as he was well enough to entertain a challenge, he would get one from Count Luigi. The brothers withdrew entirely from society and nursed their humiliation in privacy. They avoided the people and went out for exercise only late at night, when the streets were deserted. Chapter 18. Roxana commands. Gratitude and treachery are merely the two extremities of the same procession. You have seen all of it that is worth staying, for when the band and the gaudy officials have gone by. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Thanksgiving Day. Let all give humble, hearty, and sincere thanks now. But the turkeys. In the island of Fiji, they do not use turkeys, they use plumbers. It does not become you and me to sneer at Fiji. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Well, a lot of this talk of cannibals and stuff is, overstated, and it's usually against the enemy, or is this whatever. You don't eat humans' flesh. Regardless, I just, no. The Friday after the election was a rainy one in St. Louis. It rained all day long. It rained hard, apparently trying its best to wash that soot-blackened town white, but of course, not succeeding. And I think I should